horror film favorites. Black Christmas Review. Just the facts. Black Christmas is a 1974 Canadian horror movie written by Roy Moore and directed by Bob Clark, a versatile director whose other credits included the Sherlock Holmes Jack the Ripper thriller Murder by Decree, the raunchy 80s teen comedy Porky's, the 80s legal comedy drama thriller From the Hip, and the much more benign Christmas movie, A Christmas Story. The film's atmospheric and unsettling music score was composed by Carl Zitra. Plot. A sorority house is plagued by obscene and weird phone calls over the Christmas season, and then a sorority sister disappears as the body of a schoolgirl is found in a nearby park. A maniac killer is stalking the sorority sisters and may be closer than they even realize. Cast. Black Christmas has a notable cast for a 70s horror flick, including Olivia Hussey in the lead role of Jess Bradford, Margot Kidder, most famous as Lois Lane in the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, as the foul-mouthed Barb, Marion Waldman as the boozy house mother Mrs. Mack, Keir Dulley of 2001 fame as Peter, Jess's boyfriend and potential suspect, future Saturday Night Live star Andrea Martin as Phil, Lynn Griffin as Claire Harrison, the innocent who is the first to fall victim to the madman, and Art Hindle, a Canadian actor who is also a horror fan favorite thanks to his roles in this, the 1978 remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and the 1979 David Cronenberg spine chiller The Brood, as Chris Hayden, Claire's worried boyfriend, and the great John Saxon, a 70s action icon who is also a horror favorite playing another policeman, Nancy's cop father in the original A Nightmare on Elm Street and several of its sequels, as Lieutenant Fuller, a local detective who is rightly concerned by the disappearance of one of the girls in conjunction with the sinister phone calls being made to the house. Trivia. The film was released in the United States originally under a different title, Silent Night, Evil Night, due to concerns that audiences might confuse it for a blaxploitation picture, a motion picture craze at the time. Stranger in the House is another title that was used for the film, though today it is only ever known as Black Christmas. The original title of the script was Stop Me, which writer Moore was inspired to write both by the urban legend of the babysitter and the man upstairs, an urban myth that would also provide the impetus for the later 70s horror When a Stranger Calls, and a series of real-life murders that took place in Montreal's Westmount section. The script was rewritten by Timothy Bond to change the film's setting to a university on instruction from producers Richard Scouten and Harvey Sherman. Director Bob Clark also had a major impact on the script, however, adding a degree of humor and also adding more realism and intelligence to the young adult characters. The film was shot in the winter of 1973 and 74 in Toronto on a budget of just $620,000. In 1976 a novelization of the film was released written by Lee Hayes. Bette Davis was originally offered the role of Mrs. Mack, but turned it down. Edmund O'Brien was originally cast as Lieutenant Fuller, but the actor's failing health as a result of Alzheimer's ultimately led the filmmakers to realize that he would not be able to take on the role, and John Saxon was offered and accepted the part just 2 days prior to the commencement of shooting. Unusually for movies, the interior of the famous house used in the film is the actual interior of the house as seen outside, and has become a rather iconic horror location as a result. Several actors performed the voice for the obscene and deeply strange phone calls made by the killer, including actor Nick Mancuso and even director Bob Clark. Mancuso says that during recording sessions he would actually stand on his head to compress his thorax so that his voice would sound even more unhinged. Composer Carl Zitra tied combs, knives and forks tied to piano strings to generate the film's bizarre music, which he would then also slow down in order to further distort it. There is an urban legend that director John Carpenter approached Bob Clark about the possibility of a sequel to Black Christmas, the premise of which suggested by the latter later becoming Carpenter's seminal Halloween, though the truthfulness of the legend remains uncertain. In 1978 the network television premiere of the film in the United States was cancelled due to a brutal double murder of co-eds in a sorority house in Florida in which 2 other young students were also attacked. The killer would later be revealed to be the notorious Ted Bundy. The film was difficult to find on home media throughout the 1980s and 1990s, but has since been released numerous times on DVD and Blu-ray. In 2001 it was released on DVD by Critical Mass, which re-released the film as a special edition just 1 year later packed with extras. In 2006 yet another version of the DVD was released by Critical Mass, with a new transfer, a new documentary and interviews and deleted scenes. In 2008 this version was also released on Blu-ray. In 2015 a Blu-ray and DVD release entitled Seasons Grievings was released by Anchor Bay, featuring the same transfer and all previous extras as well as yet another new documentary, the Fan Expo 40th Anniversary panel, new packaging art and booklet, and a truly unique commentary from actor Nick Mancuso, who remains in character as the demented killer throughout. In 2016 the film was released on Blu-ray again by Scream Factory, which collated all previous extras as well as several new ones in addition to a brand new high-definition transfer. Famed director Quentin Tarantino is a big fan of Black Christmas, as is actor Steve Martin, who told Olivia Hussey that it was his favorite film of all time. The film was remade by X-Files writer Glenn Morgan in 2006, which most fans of the original regard as a massively inferior hack job of the worst kind. Reaction: Black Christmas was a hit in its native Canada. The film won the Best Sound Editing in a Feature for Kenneth Healy-Rae and Best Performance by a Lead Actress for Margot Kidder in the 1975 Canadian Film Awards, and in 1976 was nominated for the Best Horror Film Award by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy and Horror Films and for Best Motion Picture by the Edgar Allan Poe Awards. However, following the title change, the movie flopped in the United States on initial release, with mixed reactions from American critics. As time went on, the film began to be appreciated more and more, with many seeing it as an influence on the much more famous later 70s slasher horror movie Halloween. However, the film remained relatively obscure throughout the 80s and 90s, until the widespread DVD and Blu-ray releases in the 2000s began to garner attention from a wider audience. Today Black Christmas is widely acknowledged as a genuine classic of its genre. What I think. I love Black Christmas. I remember the film being on television when I was a kid, and as I often did at that age, pretending to be asleep on the sofa next to my mum while actually listening to the whole thing, and I heard enough to be freaked out by it. In the early 90s I finally managed to get to see the thing properly via a rental from my local video shop and immediately fell in love with it. I was a very naughty boy and only had an illicit VHS pirate of that rental to sustain me throughout the 90s and early 2000s until it was finally released on DVD in Australia. I have since purchased no less than 3 Blu-ray versions of it. An absolute freaking record for me, most recently the new Scream Factory release, which kicks ass. Black Christmas is a brilliant, eerie and genuinely unsettling slice of horror cinema that has lost none of its power to scare in the 44 years since its initial release, with Bob Clark's fantastically atmospheric direction, the wonderful performances from a truly excellent cast, the gorgeous Christmas winter cinematography, spooky music and those fucking bone-chilling phone calls from the mad killer combining to make it both a wonderful encapsulation of 70s atmosphere yet strangely timeless at the same time. The film is also very funny at times thanks to the interaction of its characters, who are several leagues ahead of the stereotypes normally seen in such movies and feel like real people living real lives with everyday issues who are suddenly subjected to a terrifying encounter with true madness and evil. Black Christmas remains firmly in my top 10 films of all time and I can give it nothing less than a full-on A+.